morning, everyone. Welcome to Wake and Take. The show must go on. It's Wednesday, November 6th. Things are happening, but we still like to talk and hear about fantasy football. So we're here. We've got 5 buys and sells to talk about today, heading into week 10. So go ahead and take out your coffee. Try to relax and enjoy the show. Exactly. No vote on if the show goes on. The show goes on. The show goes on. This is Wake and Take, my friends. And that's what we're going to do. Ryan, you are so true. You should definitely maybe get some of this in there. Anyway, we've got 5 buys and sells, I guess. Since we're doing that, don't want to get on my soapbox too much this morning. We're not here for that. You know, we're here for fantasy football. We're here for football. You know, you can go to your other content areas for your other content, you know, if you want to get into the other stuff. But we're here for football. Amen to that. Let's do it. So I've got 5 of them for you today. One of them will revolve around the Steelers. We had a big trade come in yesterday. Mike Williams going to the Steelers. We haven't been able to discuss that too much. And as a result, you know, I'm going to be crazy here. No one is going to agree here at all, probably. But I think maybe sell George Pickens. Hear me out. Hear me out on selling George Pickens as a result of this move. Listen, George Pickens doing a good job. Russell Wilson and him, that's a really good match. But my problem with this is Mike Williams is just another George Pickens, right? And George Pickens is still, of course, going to get the majority of these deep shots, kind of big explosive plays and all of that. But taking just one of those away is kind of detrimental, to me in terms of what that ceiling could really be. And if you go to PlayerProfiler, we talked about this when we launched this. There's a new little metric we've got going on called the EPX. It's George Pickens. It just kind of keeps track of all the explosive plays and all that stuff. And you can see very clearly that George Pickens leads wide receivers in this EPX. He is the number 1 wide receiver in explosive plays. And so I'm just saying, like, even just taking one of those away a game is just going to be huge for George Pickens' ceiling. Now, I will admit, you still want George Pickens, and I still want George Pickens if, you know, like, I have room for a guy that is going to be boom or bust or whatever. But I think we should try selling, because if you look at his value, and especially in Dynasty, he is the wide receiver 20 on both Keep Trade Cut and Player Profiler, but he finds himself as the wide receiver 29 on the season. And yeah, it's been a little bit better with Russell Wilson, 22 points the first game with Russell Wilson, but then, you know, just 11, 4 receptions, 74 yards, only 5 targets, down from 9 to 5. Again, Mike Williams coming in is going to take away some of those deep shots, some of those explosive plays. And I mean, we could play a fun little game here. And I'm going to end up lagging again trying to do this, but they've got such a shockingly similar profile, George Pickens and Mike Williams. Like, it's just, again, when you're only getting 5 targets a game, you know, sometimes maybe a little bit more, but a lot of those are these deep shots, and you have 2 guys operating in the exact same way. I think that just hurts your fantasy ceiling. So I would at least see what you could get for George Pickens, because there's a lot of wide receivers in this range in particular where he's at, like a Jackson Smith and Jigba, a Devontae Smith, a Roma Dunze, who we'll talk about later in the show. Maybe Tank Dell if you want to get crazy with it. There's just a ton of different options specifically at this range at wide receiver where I'm fine just kind of moving on from George Pickens. I just, you know, I don't really need any part of that at his current value, really. Because look, here we go. Check this out. These are their profiles. PlayerProfiler.com, athletic profile. Look at this. Low 40. 78th percentile speed score. I mean, literally, like, the same exact profile. 4.47 40, 4.59 40, 102 speed score. You know, mediocre burst score, 6'3", 6'4". Clashers, contested catch guys. They're going to have some spike weeks here and there, and that's really just what I want to say. Like, George Pickens needs to be treated as a spike week type wide receiver, which is awesome. I love those types of wide receivers. I love George Pickens for that matter. I've been rostering him for a while up to this point. I just think at this point, he's kind of reaching his ceiling. And now that Mike Williams is coming to town, he's going to lose 1 to 2 of those deep shots a game. He just will. And yeah, that's only 1 or 2 targets in the grand scheme of things, but those are big, important targets that George Pickens needs to get those ceiling weeks. And I just think that Mike Williams is kind of disrespected enough in the fantasy community to where you're still like, no one's really worried about it. No one's really worried about it. George Pickens is not really going to lose any value yet. But once we start to see Mike Williams, get one of those deep balls, I think it's going to be kind of hard to picture another 30-point, 25-pointer from George Pickens. So I would at least explore selling. There's just a lot of wide receivers in that range that, it's at least seeing like if you could tier up, tier down, really either one. If there's a guy you want that is below him, like here we go. We'll go to keep trade cut. PlayerProfiler about the same in terms of value, but right at wide receiver 20, here's some wide receivers within 5 either way of him: Rashee Rice, Jaden Reed, Zay Flowers, Rome Odunze, Chris Olave, Tyreek Hill, Lad McConkey, Jackson Smith and Jigba, T. Higgins, Jalen Waddle. I mean, really, the list just goes on and on. So George Pickens, I just think, see what you could get. A guy that is basically reliant on explosive plays, being the number 1 explosive play wide receiver in Player Profiler's EPX. To then have a guy who also relies on explosive plays coming to town, it kind of hurts. It hurts at least in terms of the ceiling. But he should still have some of those spike weeks, does have a pretty good schedule. I'm not saying to sell low or anything like that. Just try to see what other wide receivers in that range you could get. I would just be curious to see. Now, the rest of the show, we're going to be doing some buys. We are spending some money. And we're just going to go ahead and go with Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney, despite being the wide receiver 12 on the season, still finds himself wide receiver 45 on Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 51 on Player Profiler. And I'm not sure, even in seasonal leagues, right, with him being the wide receiver 12, if that's really where he's valued. A lot of the preseason it says there, Darnell Mooney's value isn't really matching his production at all. Really at all. I mean, like some back-to-back weeks with over 18 points. He has a 30-pointer this season. I mean, like this is a guy who's, really dominating in Atlanta. Him and Kirk Cousins are having a great connection. And it's not really slowing down. In fact, Drake London just picked up that hip pointer. So that's probably going to end up hurting Drake London a little bit. And opening the door for Darnell Mooney at least a little bit. And he's already, producing now, right? Darnell Mooney at outside the top 40 of wide receiver valuations, but being the wide receiver 12 on the season, I just think is a little bit too different. And yeah, looking like a best ball league winner. Good call, Dustin. And shout out Seth, for being one of the big people behind this. But regardless of what this Drake London injury ends up being something serious, Darnell Mooney is already producing. And then there is the upside if, that ends up being a serious hip injury for Drake London, as we're going to end up finding out throughout the coming weeks. But he's just producing too well. This Falcons offense is firing on all cylinders, and his value just isn't matching his production, plain and simple. So I'd be looking to buy Darnell Mooney big time, really. Rome Odunze's next. Again, we've talked about Rome Odunze a lot, and his value just isn't really changing even with these last couple of weeks. I mean, he's still very, very expensive. Don't get me wrong. And people, obviously, if you have Rome Odunze, you're looking for a lot. But I'm just saying, do it. Pay that a lot. I think it would be worth it. I think that Rome Odunze is just a very, very special talent. I mean, he's got the best comparable to Justin Jefferson on Player Profiler. You know how hard it is to get that. I mean, it makes sense when you look at the profile. I mean, everything is in the 80th percentile or higher in all the workout metrics. He was phenomenal in college, and he's really starting to break out over the last couple of weeks. Since the Bears bye week, he has led the Bears in receiving yards in back-to-back weeks, but he hasn't really had the true spike week. He had 100 yards receiving this week, but it was only 5 receptions and no touchdowns, so it was only 15 points. But one of those is a touchdown. I feel like the public sentiment for Rome Odunze is completely different. Like we've talked about it, all rookies draft season, right? Like there was a discussion between him, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr. And now like Brian Thomas Jr. has passed Rome Odunze as well. And he still belongs in that tier. Like he's still that good of a talent. in that good of a position. I mean, like, he's still attached to Caleb Williams, and things are still going well. Like, I mean, I don't really know how much more you could want from Rome Odunze, but it's coming. The spike weeks are coming. If you listen to my Mansion last week, Evan Ringler, our data team guru over there, called it. And we talked about it here all off season too. You know, I really think that he is turning into the wide receiver one in Chicago, and it just hasn't totally happened yet, at least in terms of the fantasy public perception. But it will at some point. So get Rome Odunze while you still can. Continuously buy, pay up for him, because he's a special talent in a special situation, and his price just still hasn't caught up. We've got two more, and then we're going to get to questions. TJ Hawkinson. Luckily, he had a pretty quiet return to this game, right? TJ Hawkinson is someone we recommended drafting a lot, and, you know, still really buying all season. And luckily, he came back to the game and didn't do too hot. You know, he only had 4 targets, no touchdowns, nothing crazy like that. But it's just important to remember that TJ Hawkinson is a supreme talent. He has been top 8 in points per game the last 4 seasons. Last year, he was the tight end 1 before his injury. Still finished 2nd in points per game, though. 900 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. I mean, he is just a phenomenal tight end, especially for fantasy. And the Vikings offense is still good with Sam Darnold at the helm. And in fact, while TJ Hawkinson had a quiet game last week, Josh Oliver did it. You know, the backup tight end. He had 5 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown. I mean, so the tight end position is still clearly very important for Minnesota, even without Kirk Cousins. TJ Hawkinson is still a very, very good tight end, and there's tons of room for him in this offense. Because he had a quiet return, I could see some fantasy managers start to lose some faith. I did see he fell a little bit on keep trade cut as well. He fell down to the tight end 7. So still totally worth buying. He's going to have a great second half of the season. He looked fine in the game. He just didn't get a ton of volume yet, but they're going to work him in, and he's going to get back to TJ Hawkinson value before it's over, right? So get TJ Hawkinson while you still can. He's a stud. No reason not to leave him, you know, on someone else's roster. Try to get him. You need tight end help, and he's an elite one. And I mean, lastly, this is a short one. I mean, Christian McCaffrey. We're just buying into it. I mean, like, what more can I even say? Like, I know that a lot of people out there are probably worried about the injury, but I mean, I'm not a doctor, right? And they're activating him. They're bringing him back for a reason. And as long as he's on the field historically, he puts up fantasy points. You know, Christian McCaffrey is just a total stud. That is what it is. And before he returns, I want to get him on my team. Even as the price gets more expensive day in, day out, I'm still trying to acquire him. He's the RB11 right now on keep trade cut, which I just think is a little too far away, right? You know, Christian McCaffrey is, you know, the fantasy player, right? Like overall fantasy player number 1 when he's on the field. And I just don't want to risk it. You know, a lot of people might. I wouldn't. I want to get Christian McCaffrey while I still can before he actually returns to the field, because I'm sure he's still going to be a god, right? He's still going to put up 20 points pretty consistently, especially since there's only a few weeks left of the season now at this point. Get Christian McCaffrey while you still can. Don't overthink it. You know, buy Christian McCaffrey. And that should do it for our buys and sells. You know, we are going to play a little bit of an ad break here, and then I'm going to answer some of your questions. So if you have any trade questions or anything, or any questions in general, go ahead and ask them while we hear a little bit about Player Profiler in general.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free, and one of our key missions is to make as much statistics and information and deep analysis available on PlayerProfiler.com for free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In package to continue to make all this possible. If you can't do All In, that's okay. We have a draft kit. Or you can just subscribe to the player rankings. Those now include tight end premium FFPC ranks, our brand new data analysis package will blow your hair back. And of course, there's our Dynasty Deluxe and our DFS Dominator. Take a moment, check out our premium services to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.
Go check out Player Profiler. It's awesome. We've done it. We've gone through our buys and sells, but I still want to answer some of your guys' questions. Let's see. You're able to trade Kyron Williams for George Pickens plus. Like, that's fine. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, buys and sells always come down to the price. I'm fine trading Kyron Williams for George Pickens plus, because then, I mean, you still get really good value. You could then still trade George Pickens, or you could ride it out if you want. I mean, there's probably still another week in George Pickens, like, ceiling game, but eventually I just, again, I just think it's more so he's going to lose 2 to 3 of those, long shots a game. And that's just a big deal as it pertains to how many points he can put on a week-to-week basis. Would you drop Michael Pittman to stash Trey Denson? I would not drop Michael Pittman. I still think he has some value. I think it was just kind of a weird week this week. And I know Josh Downs is kind of the guy, but Michael Pittman is still a very, very good wide receiver and still has had some big weeks this season. I would hold on to him, but if there's another option out there, definitely do want to try to get Benson. How bad of a hit will Chase Brown take with the Herbert edition? Not too bad. I mean, I still think Chase Brown's going to be the main guy, and he's earning their trust a lot. I do just think that Khalil Herbert is a very good running back, right? Like, he does have some good athleticism, and he's strong too. Like, we've seen it from him before. Really good in the explosive plays and all that fun stuff. So I do think that Herbert is going to get some opportunity, but I think Chase Brown has done more than enough to earn their trust and still kind of be the main guy there. Herbert might just get a touchdown here or there, but he's more so a stash for if anything happens to Chase Brown, if you want to get him on your team. Can Coker be a late season winner? I don't think so. I just don't think the Panthers offense is good enough to produce a true late season winner. I think it's going to be some random dude, probably a running back, that ends up being the late season winner. You've been offered 2 seconds for DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, look, John, if you are not looking to compete this year, I would take those 2 seconds and run. And I love DeAndre Hopkins, but those 2 seconds, probably turn into something nice, and you can use them to get another piece more than likely. I mean, I'm not sure that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be the focal point of the offense every single week. We do love DeAndre Hopkins. We talked about him a lot this season. But 2 seconds, I mean, to me, feels like a good jumping off point. Maybe counter and see if they would, go so far as to give you a first. But I mean, getting those 2 seconds, especially if you're not competing, is good. If you are competing, maybe really think about it. But still, I think you could use those seconds to get some other pieces that probably have some similar production. Which Saints wide receivers are a good ad this week? I mean, literally none of them. I mean, seriously, it's just Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill. Maybe Foster Moreau if he's out there. Maybe, but for the most part, man, this offense is just going to be terrible. Pick up the Falcons defense. Not buying CMC, you say. Yes, it's just his practice window opening up, and that's another thing, right? Like, if he doesn't play, then definitely buy him. Like, we're just buying him for when he returns, because when he returns, he's going to score fantasy points. It's just like his value still is, kind of a little, most owners are still a little bit timid with him and maybe open to selling him. But I mean, once he actually puts up those points and we see him on the field, it's not going to happen. It's going to slam shut. I understand his price is getting more and more expensive as the days go on, but still, I really don't want to risk it. I want to get him on my team. Would you trade J.K. Dobbins for Nico Collins? If this is on the table, if this is what you're asking, like, I would rather have Nico Collins than J.K. Dobbins for sure. I believe he's eligible to return this week, Nico Collins, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, we'll see if he does, but if I'm not mistaken, this would be the 4th week. Either way, I don't believe in J.K. Dobbins long-term, unfortunately. I'm still trying to get in Kamani Vidal territory. And Nico Collins is just a stud and a half. Especially when he returns, especially since you say you need wide receivers, I think that is a great trade if that's been offered to you. Pearsall or Jennings rest of season? Probably Pearsall. It's looking like Pearsall. Although Jennings should also be a decent addition to any team right now as well. If you're rebuilding, would you sell Derrick Henry for a late first? Is Najee worth an early second? I would maybe hold off on buying Najee, to be honest. That's not a bad price. I mean, if you want him, that's not a bad price at all, but I would maybe hold off. I'm not sure what's going on with this contract situation, where he'll be next year. If he's really even that good, he still seems like a very value or volume dependent running back. And, there's a lot of those in the NFL. There's not a lot of room for Najee Harris's really at the end of the day. So I would maybe hold off on buying him if you're rebuilding. In terms of the late first for Derrick Henry, if you're rebuilding, that's not bad, but I feel like you could get more, to be honest. I mean, I would at least try for a mid first, or, I maybe try to trade him for, like Kamani Vidal or plus, obviously a Trey Benson plus. Downgrade him essentially for a young running back with something on top is what I would do, or just maybe tier into another running back as opposed to a draft pick. But either way, I think you can get a bit more with how he's playing. And let's see, here we go. Would you sell Tyreek Hill? And then for who? I would hold on to him at this point, really. I think that he's been a little too disappointing the last few weeks, I would say. So because of that, I don't think that you're really going to be able to get enough return for what he can bring. I still think that we're going to see ceiling Tyreek Hill at some point. In fact, he was one of our biggest sells of the season heading into the year. At this point, I think I'm kind of buying Tyreek Hill. I wouldn't be opposed to getting him on any team, really. So I would probably hold on to him right now, to be honest, especially if you're making a playoff push. I think he'll turn it around. It just takes 1 week, right? Right, he is like a week-winning wide receiver. He could put up 50 this week, and you'll be happy. Like, I would hold on to him. Would you drop Austin Eckler for Xavier Legette? I don't think you can drop Eckler, no. I mean, it sounds like this is a shallow-ish league, but still, I think that you could probably hold on to Eckler. But I do want to get Legette. But it's possible he slips through waivers this week or doesn't play because of this wrist injury. So it doesn't seem like a dire need unless you really, really need. Try to get him. Would you drop Olave for Odunze or Legette? I mean, honestly, it seems like it. Yeah, I would get Odunze. I would do that for Odunze. It just seems like we're not really getting Olave this season. I mean, maybe try to trade him for something before you drop him. Sounds like a shallow league, but I'm not really sure if we're going to see him much this season and what is even worth when he does come back. Odunze is a fun play, and this sounds like a shallowish league. And that should do it. I'm going to echo Snowman here. Just, hope everyone has a good day. Hang in there. That's all we can do. Enjoy your fantasy football teams. Enjoy your loved ones. Have a good day. And, hit that like button. Hit the subscribe. We'll be back tomorrow.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.